All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Marlins Prospects Pod. My name is David Fernandez. I am here with Joe Frisaro of manonsecond.com, manon2nd.com, and we're going to go through everything that you want to know about some of the hottest prospects in the Marlins system, including Max Meyer and his recent struggles. We're going to talk a little bit today about Jerar Encarnacion's AAA debut. We'll touch on Lewin Diaz. Griffin Conine's looking good in Pensacola, and a handful of other things. How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great, David, and I love the intro music. I mean, we're getting high tech here
Yes,
for
sir.
our loyal followers, but the show's doing really well, and really happy to be back for another week. And before we dive too deep, do we got our dugout mugs ready to go?
Yeah.
We got our little promo going, dugoutmugs.com/man-on-2nd. Get yours today. Hit that link and order off there if you like what we're doing. That helps us out. And always great product. And anything that's got a baseball theme is good, right? Right, David?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we need some good news because yesterday in AAA, there was a little bit of rough news for the Marlin fans and who followed this show and the Max Meyer fans because Max hit a little bump in the road yesterday. What were your takeaways, David?
Yeah, he did. Yesterday was, it was a struggle. His last two starts really have been a real struggle. He had a lot of he had a tough time yesterday, really sort of locating his pitches. He really struggled with his command. Over his last two starts, 8 1/3 innings, he's given up 14 hits, including 4 homers, 14 earned runs, 5 walks, 5 strikeouts. The strikeouts have come way down and the walks have gone way up, which is obviously not what you want to see from your high-end pitching prospect. Yesterday, against a Durham team that he handled really, really well, the last time he faced them, he only went 3 1/3 and he labored through everything. He gave up a career-high 8 earned runs, gave up 7 hits, including a homer, a season-high 4 walks, a season-low 1 strikeout. He threw 72 pitches. Only 38 of those went for strikes. Yesterday was a real struggle for Max Meyer. And you were hoping that yesterday was going to be a bounce back, considering what his previous start had been. But, it was bad. There's no other way to describe it. He was bad yesterday. And maybe you look at it and he was bumped up a day. He was scheduled originally to start on Wednesday evening. He was supposed to start tonight, but when the Marlins called up Castano was supposed to start Tuesday. So Meyer got moved up a day, but it was really a day and a half because yesterday's game for Jacksonville started at 11 o'clock in the morning. So going from planning for a 7 p.m. Wednesday start to all of a sudden an 11 a.m. Tuesday start, that obviously didn't work for him. And he really struggled with his command. He didn't have any feel. You saw him sort of look off into the stands, so many times with when he was with his release, and he was struggling with the ball the whole time. It was just a disaster from start to finish.
Yeah. It's welcome to professional baseball,
Yeah.
and it doesn't get any easier, and the big leagues aren't going to get any easier. The humbling experience is what everybody goes through. The best of them do. My level of concern with Max is not any higher, to be honest with you, David. My evaluation of Max is pretty much the same because I kind of thought he's a reliever anyway. But Max Meyer, okay, I have some of my people I called up that saw him, and I did some, talk to several people about Max even before yesterday and those who saw him yesterday. And obviously a real off day. When I see numbers like that, my first reaction, David, is health. First and foremost, when you're walking guys and you're not commanding the baseball, are you physically okay? Reassured that's not the problem. Fastball 94 to 97.
Yeah.
That's kind of right where he's supposed to be. So physically, he's fine. That's good. The mechanics maybe a little off. Obviously, there we talk about the words command. He couldn't locate his pitches anywhere, especially the fastball. That was probably the most alarming thing. Is when we talk about locating is if you need to put it down the way and you put it down the middle or up and in, then you're not locating. You could be throwing strikes with it, but if you're in the middle of the plate, the damage is going against you. The fastball is a pitch I've been curious to see how he does with. Reassuring, the slider still is plus, and the changeup, from what I'm hearing from people that see it, a lot of potential. Those two pitches are in place. So the quality of the stuff's good. And probably the biggest positive of the day, and I look for this too in pitchers, especially those who struggle. How do they handle it? Max apparently passes that grade because he was competing his heart out no matter what. He wasn't, and you want that bulldog mentality. You don't want the come and get me mentality, that kind of, oh my gosh, deer in the headlight look. So those are all the positives. And there weren't a lot other than, you know what? The best are going to get knocked around. You're very rarely are you going to pitch to a 1.7 ERA over the course of a full year. So humbling, enlightening. I know, the Marlins are going to use this to justify not calling him up earlier, or, all the Twitter GMs are wrong about him.
Yeah.
I still maintain Max Meyer is big league ready right now. And I've been told as much by people that have seen him. And this gets back to where we've discussed before, and I certainly discussed on the Man on Second podcast, is what's his role? He's not, I don't have him as a top of a rotation starter. Maybe middle, and that's fine. That's fine if you're, there. If that's your high end, like I said, I think he's more of a back end reliever, because I think that's, the body type. I see Craig Kimbrell more than I do see, Sonny Gray, but he can help this team, the Marlins meaning, in a role, just like Ellie Iser could help in a role. It's the overexposure of it. Is Max, or, 3 innings. I mean, obviously they don't have a bullpen plan for Max Meyer. That wasn't in the cards this year. So they're stretching him out and they're giving him work, and they're allowing him to take his lumps, as well as, we're going to evaluate. I don't get too high for the worst, or too high for the best, or too low for the worst. You eventually you settle who you are. So with that in mind, he can be a 4 to 5 inning starter right now and build up accordingly. So it doesn't change anything from how I see. As long as he's physically healthy, there's plenty of guys that go out and give up runs. Yeah. Pitchers give up runs. I mean, it's even the best of them have bad days, and I'm going to chalk that up to. And I'm not. Yes, you laid it out well. He's supposed to go Wednesday routine. They're creatures of routine. 11 a.m. is not an ideal start time, especially, but you're looking to answer the bell, especially after the previous outing being a little rough. But like I said, as long as the slider's fine, changeup showing promise, if he could get the ball to both sides of the plate, which I think Edward Cabrera does so well, he could pitch both sides of the plate when we talk about Edward. Max just has to iron that out. Yeah. So it gets down to me, again, with Max, clearly they have a longer view of when he's coming up, and they're clearly the Marlins didn't make his promotion an urgent thing, and right. What we've discussed before is to get your best 5, 6, 7, 8 pitchers in the big leagues. How do you maximize them? That plan is different than the Max Meyer is he ready plan.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where fans, particularly Marlins Twitter fans, the Twitter GMs, of which I am one. I am. That's where so many of the fans get frustrated, I think, because on the one hand, they're saying they want to win and they want to win now. And even though they're below 500, they're still in the mix for one of those wild card spots. But then you turn around and you look at, other than yesterday, really the unmistakable reality that Meyer should be among the top pitchers in the organization. So you really wonder, and this is something that, Marlins GM Kim Ng, she talked about this the other day in an interview. She said, when you zoom out a little bit, Max has got 147 1/3 innings in professional baseball. And so when we look at this, we want these guys, when they come up, to be as prepared as they can, given the circumstances, to get big league hitters out. And that's the goal that we have in mind for Max right now. The reality is he has faced some major league hitters. We saw him do really well against Acuna, and there's been a handful of other guys that he's faced along the way on rehab assignments, very much like Acuna, and he's done pretty well. Obviously, what he's done over the last 2 starts is not at all what you want to see. And, they may use this as a justification, but I think the real key here is he consistently developing that changeup? Because the difference between a starter and a reliever a lot of times is quite literally the amount of pitches you can throw. If you're a 2-pitch pitcher, you're probably going to be a reliever. But if you're a solid 3-pitch pitcher, you're that much more capable as far as being a starter is concerned. So, we need to see him bounce back. I think the good thing for Meyer at this point is he's going to see the same team on his next turn. So he started on Tuesday, and then he's scheduled to make the start on Sunday as well. And Sunday will be the last game of this series against Durham. So we really get to see how does he bounce back against the same lineup that just bullied him for 3 1/3 innings. So I'm really interested to see how he responds. Obviously, the Marlins want to see him continue to develop the way that they want him to develop. But listen, yesterday wasn't all bad for Jacksonville because, well, this happened.
He had a lot of great sayings. 2-2. And Encarnacion swings, puts a charge into that one. Back at the track in right field. That one is out of here. The first AAA home run for Jerar Encarnacion. And Jacksonville's on the board here in the bottom of the 8th inning.
So Jerar Encarnacion made his AAA debut yesterday with the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. He was playing in the outfield, and he got a hold of one. Actually, he got a hold of 2 yesterday. He went 2 for 4, and the reality is the double that he had in his second at-bat would have been a home run in quite literally every other AAA ballpark other than the one that he was playing in yesterday. The center field wall in Jacksonville is 420 feet away, and that's the longest distance. That's the deepest center field in all of the International League, and he hit that ball legitimate for like 417 feet. So it would have been a 2-homer day for Encarnacion yesterday, but obviously 2 for 4 yesterday with a double, a homer, 2 RBI. The Jumbo Shrimp lost 8-4, but he really sort of sparked a late game rally for them. They had been scoreless at that point. At AAA Pensacola this year, he was just absolutely raking. He was hitting, as you could see there, 375. He had 8 homers. He had 18 RBI. He had a relatively low strikeout rate, 25.7%. And he, by all accounts, earned this promotion to Jacksonville, and he's joining a very crowded outfield out there. I mean, they've got the likes of J.J. Bleday, Peyton Burdick, Brian Miller, who's currently on the IL, but you've got now Encarnacion to throw into the mix. But his AAA debut was exciting to watch yesterday.
Oh, yeah. And I was excited for him to get the call up because I've been a big Encarnacion fan for many years now. And I still think he's kind of been a victim of being on the 40-man at a time during the pandemic when, he was right on the cusp of making a real move. And then the minor league season was obviously halted in 2020. An alternate site guy had to do that. Then in 21, he had, I think, some injuries. So, it didn't completely click for him then. And so he had to start at AA, as you noted, in Pensacola, whereas you noted he just tore it up, the 1,009 OPS, that he had in Pensacola on top of that. As the K rate, basically 26%, round up. That's perfectly fine because he's making more contact. And we saw in the highlight, and how about that, our viewers, David and his he's a whiz over here. Now we got highlights as part of the podcast.
Working on it.
We're working. We're just raising the bar here. He hits the ball in the upper bleachers in right field. That's like lefty power hitter territory.
Yep.
And we got to get some StatCast numbers on him. I'm gonna have to work on that to find out what some exit velos are like, because as you can see, Gerard was always big. Now he's a man. Was he 24? But he's filled out.
Yep.
and he is a force of power. And you just saw how easy that is. If you could take that pitch up and away, that ball's out of Lone Depot. And going to center, he's capability going all over the yard. And I'm excited for him. And they're mixing in some first base for him.
Yep.
Obviously could play some corner outfield as well and DH. And we've discussed, is he a trade possibility? But before we even go there, I tell you what, he keeps doing that. He's not going anywhere. No. And where he might be going is, and we noted this before we hit the live button on the podcast, he's on the 40-man. So he could be going to the big leagues faster than Peyton Burdick, J.J. Bleday, who are yet to be on the 40-man.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last night in the Marlins game. Brian De La Cruz got hit with a pitch. I think they're calling it a forearm contusion at this point. Yeah, so he came out of the game. Jesus Sanchez went into the game. But if Brian De La Cruz lands on the IL and John Birdie remains on the IL, I know he's working his way back. He was at the ballpark yesterday, but he's still, they're going to give him a rehab assignment and everything. So he's still at least a few days away. The outfield depth is getting pretty thin. And so if De La Cruz lands on the IL, the only other outfielder on the 40-man right now is Encarnacion. So he would go from AA, have a little pit stop in Jacksonville at AAA, and then go straight to the show. He does have some positional versatility, as you mentioned. He spent a lot of time at first base in Pensacola, particularly last season, because he was there with Bleday and with Burdick, and they hadn't traded Cameron Meisner yet, who was also an outfielder. So, Griffin Conine, who we're going to talk about in a few minutes, he was also in the mix there. So they wanted to get him consistent at bats. So he was getting some turns over at first base. Obviously, first base is another position that's crowded for the Marlins as well, with Garrett Cooper and Jesus Aguilar. And then obviously Lewin Diaz, who's, gone up and down, recently. But with Encarnacion, if he shows you that power, if he keeps the strikeouts down to, a reasonable percentage, and he continues to produce, he's 24 years old. They're all kind of bunched in that same age bracket, 23, 24 years old. So, he very well could make that transition, or maybe he is trade bait. Although if he keeps hitting the ball like that, as you said, he might be somebody that you want hitting the ball at Lone Depot with some of the other bats that they have in that lineup.
Yeah, I just, as tempting as it is to get that power up fast, I don't want him to move too fast on him, because I don't want him to get demoralized if big league pitching is going to carve him up, either with, just nasty breaking stuff and heat, and excessive velocity. But, so I wouldn't mind him spending a good portion of the season down at AAA, just to keep getting the at-bats, keep showing what he could do. The taller guys tend to have, they're longer. In their swings, they tend to have more holes. But there's a lot to like. And I would just have somebody just working with that guy and just getting the at-bats and working on the contact. Because I have to imagine his BABIP's got to be really high. I go back to 2019 when he got called up from I think they were in Clinton at the time, that low A, or the team, and they went to Jupiter and high A, and he hit the ball in some. Actually, I think we went up there to see Sixto Sanchez or someone like that in 19, pitch in the A ball like a day later. And everyone said, "Oh, Joe, you should have been here the day before." I had several scouts mentioned Encarnacion with Jeter there, hit the ball in the building like twice. And that's pretty much for the people that know Jupiter, the buildings are, the clubhouses and the offices of the Cardinals on right field, the Marlins in the left field side. And to hit that building's the top of it or up there is pretty good poke. And pretty much Stanton's like the only one that would do that regularly. And for Encarnacion to go up there just kind of reminded you of the immense power he has. But again, if he could get that swing and miss down and not be rushed, as tempting as we like to see it, that could be a really, really impactful, DH in another year or so in the big leagues.
Absolutely. And the fact that we have the DH now for the National League, I think helps the Marlins hang on to guys like him. But the other thing that'll help him, especially from a developmental perspective, you bring him to Jacksonville and then let him play first base, because you've got another guy in Jacksonville playing first base who probably should be with the Marlins right now. And they called him up for like half an hour over the weekend, right? They had him drive down overnight, 6 hours or so. It's not the easiest drive in the world, but it's not the worst. He had to drive down one day just to sit on the bench and drive back the next day. So it's a kind of a strange situation. I guess it had to do with maybe the injury scare with Garrett Cooper, but the Cooper, obviously he wasn't so hurt that he couldn't play regularly anymore. But so Lewin with the Jumbo Shrimp this season, he's hitting 264. He's got an 825 OPS, 6 homers. He's got 10 doubles. He's got a team leading 30 RBI, 16 walks. He's got a 25.8 K percentage. And we know how good he is as a defender. He's only committed 1 error this season, nearly 100% fielding percentage. In May alone, he's got 12 games that he's played in May. The slash line is there, 314, 339, 608, which is really impressive. He's got 3 homers, 6 doubles, 13 RBI. We've said this about Max before. I certainly said it about Max before, but I'm going to say it here about Lewin. There's very little that he has left to prove at the AAA level, and it's just a matter of making some room for him so that he can help the Marlins at the major league level, which would open the door for Encarnacion to transition to first base and allow Blade and Burdick and Brian Miller and some of these other guys, down the line, Griffin Conine, handle the outfield. What you have anything on what happened with Leyman Diaz recently?
I think what's going on is when Joey Wendell with the hammy, and I guess he's moving along pretty well, they lose the lefty bat. And even though Wendell isn't necessarily your true power hitter, he does have pop, and Donnie has occasionally had him hit cleanup based on lineup construction to get a lefty bat there. So why does Lewin get the call? They lose a lot of versatility with Wendell not there. Lewin provides that. And to your point on, he really is a finished product in terms of development. 2,099 at bats. That's not even his plate appearances in his minor league career.
Yeah.
Normally 1,500 or so is, you're kind of big league ready, anything 1,000. Ideally, the great ones kind of get up there fast, but he is 25. I mean, he's the definition of blocked, and I would think if Wendell is out for a more prolonged period and bench construction, because it does matter. You can't just, people always like, oh, bring up this player, bring up that player. Well, you might need that lefty bat because you're loaded with right-handers or you're loaded with only outfielders or only middle infielders. And that worked to Lewin's advantage as well. He just has to keep doing what he's doing. I mean, that's the bottom line. And again, I'm a believer there's no such thing as too much development. And normally these things sort itself out. But right now, it seems like at every turn, there's a wall in the way of Lewin Diaz.
Yeah, they've been, the Marlins, that is, they've been relatively healthy throughout the year. I mean, Joey Wendell's injury is maybe the first sort of really significant one for, an everyday player. And I mean, he's basically an everyday player, even though he plays 3 different positions, right? But if the injury concerns continue, if Cooper or Aguilar, get hurt, or, one of the corner outfield guys land on the IL, and that creates a spot for Lewin, again, we've seen that he's ready to produce. He's swung the bat okay at the major league level. It's obviously something that is a work in progress, but he's definitely somebody that could help. If he does get promoted, and he creates a roster spot, and maybe Encarnacion moves over to first base at that point, then maybe down the line later in the summer, we see somebody like Griffin Conine jump from Pensacola to Jacksonville. And Griffin Conine has looked really, really good of late. We know that strikeouts have been a problem for him in the past, but over his last 21 games, he is really, really showing out in Pensacola. He's hitting 370. He's got a 1.109 OPS. He's got 4 homers, 4 doubles, 2 triples, 17 RBI. He's walked 12 times. He's got that K percentage over his last 21 games at a very manageable 29%, even though it's closer to 35 or 36 for the whole year. He's got at least one hit in 19 of his last 21 games, and he's been on base in 20 of his last 21 games. He's looking really, really good. He's locked in right now. That Pensacola team has got some really exciting prospects between Conine and Paul McIntosh, who we've talked about in the past. Obviously, Perez is there, and they've got some really fun arms like Josh Simpson in the bullpen. But Conine is really starting to show out in Pensacola at Double-A.
Yeah, and much like it, Lewin, left-handed power,
Yep.
and which you like that, Encarnacion, right-handed, Griffin Conine, lefty. What I like, look, I'm not the biggest batting average defines you, but the 283 batting average, I do like that, to go with the 354 on base, so we know about the strikeout rates, and it's going to come with him,
Yep.
but, the batting average is still pretty good, because when we look at some of the other batting averages, you got, Burdick up at AAA hitting 229. I think Blade is down to like 219 or 218, but he's over 800 OPS. Yeah. So we're seeing that kind of minor leaguer where, I even looked up the guy I love, Tristan Casas in AAA in the Red Sox system, obviously a South Florida kid. Now he's 22 compared to these other guys like 24, 25. He's hitting 248, 359, 457, 816 OPS for Tristan Casas, 22.4 K rate, 14.7 walk rate. Compare that to like Blade, 25 K, 17.6 walk, 218 batting average. And so you see what I'm saying? A lot of the hitters, there's not a ton of the pure hitter they're seeing in the minor leagues, this kind of 250-ish or maybe a little below, with the high on base and the 800 OPS, which are all livable and good. The slugging's usually pretty good. So, if little Niner can hit, over 280 in Double-A, keep that average up there. Hey, the K rate, obviously you can't live at 36% in the big leagues, but if you start pushing that down enough, there's enough game, because clearly, and the encouraging thing from the Marlins point of view is these are impactful hitters. Whether they are that raw power is going to translate in the grades that scouts like to give to game power, especially at big league level, we don't know, because it's a different animal up in the big leagues. But let the kid keep doing what he's doing, and I think that could kind of take care of itself. They may need to make a trade though at some point. I think that the big league club is a little repetitive with the Aguilar Cooper thing is still a little repetitive. The outfielders are a little repetitive. That somebody can go and create a spot for, whether it's Encarnacion or maybe he goes to bring you something, or maybe Griffin Conan can go and bring you something. You can't have too many good players, and so I found that interesting. Again, I'm not the big batting average only guy, but you don't want to necessarily see 210, 220 batting averages in the higher levels of the minor league ball, because big leagues is a little tougher anyway.
Yeah, and the thing that you want to watch out for with Conine, again, 24 years old, like a lot of these other prospects, they're all kind of grouped together. But I think with Conine, based on when he was drafted, based on how many years he's been in, I think he might be somebody in line for the Rule 5 draft. So they may need to protect him this coming off season, but again, they got a lot of guys that are in that range that, you would think they're going to trade from this depth. We've always talked about the pitching depth. Well, it looks like they've got some minor league depth in terms of power bats as well. So maybe they combine some of those things to improve the major league club, right? To get somebody for the back end of the bullpen, or, another sort of consistent hitting veteran, something like that. It's definitely something that we want to keep an eye on, and from a bullpen perspective, the guy that I wanted to mention here, at least from Jacksonville's bullpen hasn't been great this year. It's been kind of up and down. But one guy that really impressed me yesterday was Jake Fishman, who's a lefty. He came out of the pen in relief of Meyer yesterday. He tossed 2 2/3 innings. He had 6 strikeouts in 2 2/3 innings. And he's been really, really good this year. 2.70 ERA. He's got a whip below 1. He's got an 0.90 whip. He's got 23 strikeouts over 20 innings pitched. He does have 1 save, so he does have a little bit of experience on the back end, closing out games and stuff like that. But he's somebody who's got a unique delivery. He's almost like a 3/4 delivery, kind of hides the ball. So he's somebody, and he's 27 years old, so he might be in the mix later in the year if they continue to churn through the back end of that bullpen. I mean, we've seen guys like Tommy Nance come and go. Well, he's currently with the team, but Tommy Nance is there. I mean, Zach Pop has had an appearance, and he's back in Jacksonville. They called up Paul Campbell, but he landed on the IL. So they've kind of churned through a lot of these arms, but the organization lost an arm, a lefty in Grant Dayton. He opted out of his minor league contract, and he was pitching pretty well for Jacksonville. But when you look at a guy like Jake Fishman, again, 27 years old, and he's been really good against left-handers this year. So maybe he's an option down the line for the bullpen. He pitched with Team Israel in the 2020 Olympics, so he does have a little bit of big game experience, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But he's probably somebody that we're going to want to keep an eye on as the Marlins sort of continue and go through this process.
Dave, could he go multiple innings, or is he pretty much? Yeah,
he's a multi-inning guy. I mean, normally, 2-3 innings. He's gone obviously shorter. Yesterday he went 2 2/3. So he's a guy that could eat up some innings. Who knows? We've talked about it here. If Cody Poteet, who looked great yesterday, if he becomes an option in the back end of the bullpen, maybe Jake Fishman becomes an option as a longer reliever. Who knows? I mean, we know that they called up Castano, so Castano might slot into that long reliever role if Poteet stays in the starting rotation.
Yeah, and that's what I'm becoming more and more of a fan of, carrying multiple long inning guys for some of the things we've talked about here, where if Eliezer is, in my book, a 4-inning pitcher, not a 5. If you already kind of go in with a little bit of a Rays mentality, not your traditional 1-inning opener, but 3 2/3. If he gives you 4, great, but kind of get him out of the game before the 5th inning.
Yeah.
That if it's Fishman, it could go 2. And Castano, I do like Castano. I know his numbers aren't good, but he's shown in the big leagues. I do like him in a role. I think he can handle the big leagues. He's pitched in New York. He's pitched. He's pitched. I'm not worried about his numbers so much. If he's throwing the ball okay, I care more about that than what his minor league numbers are. So, but my point is, if you could have a couple of lefties to go with some of the righties, like the Poteets, and we'll get into some more of the pitching in future pods. But we covered a lot of ground here, my friend, and
yes,
and these are always fun. I hope that it illuminated our fans even more. Don't quit yet on Max. I mean, hey, people, he's still too valuable. Again, he's healthy, he's fine, he's a bulldog. Just let him deal with the hiccups and let him do what he's got to do to get to the big leagues. But outside of that, great show, David, and tell everyone how they can find us.
Yeah, so make sure that you subscribe to the 5 Reasons YouTube channel here.
Hit the like button.
Hit the like button. You could leave us a comment if there's somebody that you want us to talk about. I know that Joe Mack made his single A debut, low A ball with Jupiter. He made his debut yesterday, so maybe we could talk about him in the future. There's a ton of guys in the system. Obviously, we've talked about Khalil Watson in the past, but I'm sure we're going to talk about him again. So if there's somebody that you'd like us to touch on, you could always leave us a comment. You could tag us in social media, shoot us a tweet or something. You see my Twitter handle right there, by DL Fernandez. Joe, you're at Joe Frisaro, right?
Yeah, or at Man-on-2ND.
Or at Man-on-2ND. So you can connect with us on Twitter. Again, if you like and subscribe, you turn on the notifications for this YouTube channel, you'll get our weekly content. Obviously, you'll get Joe's Marlins podcast that he does with Eric on a weekly basis. We have some other Marlins shows that kind of come and go. And then obviously all of the other stuff that's happening in South Florida with the Miami Heat and the Florida the Panthers. So much great content on the channel. Definitely make sure that you subscribe. And if you're looking at the little scroll at the bottom of the screen, you want to get your hands on one of these bad boys, dugoutmugs.com/Man-on-2ND. You can get your hands on one of these great dugout mugs. And again, like and subscribe, shoot us a comment, tag us on social media. and we'll see you guys next week. Enjoy the baseball.